I still think that cinema is the essence of what we do. That has a lot to do with, I think, the collective experience of almost cathedral-like arena. There's an energy in that can never be duplicated anywhere else. So I don't know how to answer that more than I just do what I am drawn to.
Herzlich willkommen, liebe Zuschauer. Hallo, lieber Tobi.
Hallo, Chris.
Wir finden uns hier nochmal ganz kurz zusammen, bevor es in das Interview mit Nicolas Winding Refn geht, denn also diejenigen, die jetzt auf dieses Video geklickt haben, die wissen schon, um was es geht, die wissen schon, was sie jetzt gleich erwarten wird. Bevor aber das Video-Interview mit Nicolas Winding Refn startet, das wir beide im Rahmen des 72. Internationalen Filmfests Mannheim-Heidelberg mit dem Regisseur führen konnten, müssen wir euch ganz kurz noch was erklären, denn wir hatten ein paar technische Probleme. Aber das erzählt am besten der Mann mit der Technik.
Und der Mann mit den technischen Problemen.
Ja,
genau, weil es nämlich so war, dass ein Mikro plötzlich nicht lief. Ich bin sehr froh, dass es weder Refn noch dich getroffen hat, sondern es war mein eigenes Mikro. Man hört mich noch über das Mikro von, ich weiß nicht, ob ich dann schlussendlich dann das Mikro von dir genommen habe oder ob ich mich selber einfach vom Winding Refns Mikro einfach lauter gedreht habe. Also man hört mich, nur man hört einen qualitativen Unterschied.
Ja, das Interview ist ja auch nicht allzu lang. Dazu sollten wir jetzt vielleicht noch was sagen. Ihr habt es am Timecode vom Video auch schon gesehen. Die technischen Fehler wiegen deshalb vielleicht nicht so schwer, da wir mit Winding Refn auch nur eine Viertelstunde Zeit hatten. Also das ist jetzt auch gar nicht irgendwie despektierlich gemeint, sondern wir freuen uns sehr, dass wir diese Möglichkeit hatten. Der Gute hatte aber einen sehr, sehr vollen Zeitplan, war unter anderem bei mehreren Q&As, war auch bei einer Masterclass dabei. Darüber haben wir aber noch ein bisschen was im Podcast zu Drive erzählt, denn wir haben jetzt aktuell noch eine Filmbesprechung zu Drive aufgenommen, der, ich glaube, dein Lieblingsrefn-Film ist auf jeden Fall.
Ja, auf jeden Fall, ja.
Ja, ich denke bei mir eigentlich auch. Also das sind auch gute 1,5-2 Stunden Podcasts, die ihr da euch noch anhören könnt. Da erzählen wir auch noch ein bisschen was zu dem, was Refn eben in diesen Veranstaltungen noch erzählt hat. Und da er aber in 1,5 Tagen mehrere Veranstaltungen hatte und von einem Termin zum nächsten gerannt ist, mehr oder weniger, hatten wir, wie gesagt, 15 Minuten nur Zeit mit ihm. Die haben wir aber hoffentlich gut nutzen können, trotz Aufbauschwierigkeiten und technischer Schwierigkeiten und wie auch immer. Also wir hoffen, wir haben für euch auch interessante Fragen gestellt und wünschen euch viel Spaß. Ich glaube, mehr bleibt gar nicht zu sagen.
Ja.
Film ab.
Film ab.
Thanks again for having time for us today. At this festival, Pusher, Drive and Only God Forgives will be shown, which allows for us for an interesting look at your body of work. How do you yourself look back at these phases of your creative work and what do you take from them today, especially since Only God Forgives 10 years already have passed?
Well, I don't really think so much about the past. I just wake up in the morning and try to make it through the day.
Okay. So you don't really take a look back at your own old movies?
I'm more interested in the future than I am in the past in a way. I find there's more to experience, you know.
Okay, so I have a question for the future. After Drive, which was a big success, there was no Drive 2. Instead, you continued on a somewhat radical path in the way that with every new project, what I believe, you stuck to your creative vision. And in another interview, you said that you have a constant fear of repeating yourself. So while every project is very distinct from one another, your handwriting is clearly visible. Could you tell us a little bit about the process of how a new project comes together with this fear in mind of not wanting to repeat yourself?
Well, I don't really have like a plan. Mm-hmm. I think having no plan is more interesting. And then you just kind of, one day you get an idea, and that idea becomes a thing. That thing starts to become, like a concept. And then it just slowly builds from there, sometimes fast. But I don't have an interest where it comes from, but I find it interesting where it could potentially be going.
In Drive, the scenes often divided into 2 or at times 4 parts of a frame, depicting the storytelling from a wider angle and allowing for more diverse interpretations of the scene. An example would be the empty space in the framing of the hallway scene with Ryan Gosling and Carey Mulligan. And this empty space is only filled after a couple of minutes with Oscar Isaac. Could you elaborate on your process of this regards? Is this a cautious decision made during the pre-production, or is this spontaneously ingenuity on set?
Well, I don't really storyboard, but I shoot it in chronologically order so that I can see how the picture evolves. And I like emptiness just like I like slowness, and I like silence. I like all the things that is considered the enemy of creativity in modern days. Because everything today has to be compact, it has to be filled, it had to go fast, it had to be noisy, it had to be, almost offensive. And I find it interesting, that when you have children, you encourage them at such an early age to engage and to breathe and to be aware and to understand space, time, movement. But it's all done in terms of like almost meditatively for one's brain to evolve. And I never understood why then at some time when we're adults, all that has to stop. In a way, we're constantly evolving. And so in the situation like hallways are very interesting because they have depth. And if you just put an image with a sense of depth, you already have like a narrative, and then very simple elements can adjust to then create a storyline out of it. So it's the surroundings is as much as important as the people in the surroundings. Just like the frames around the surroundings are as important as the faces of the performer.
Okay. A different question would be, everyone who has seen Drive will recognize the iconic jacket from Ryan Gosling. I've also tried it myself, but I'm of the firm belief that Ryan Gosling is probably the only person on this planet that can pull it off. What is the backstory behind this unique jacket, and how did you come to choose it?
Well, I grew up in New York in the 80s, and I remember that I always was very envious of people that had these a bit like bomber jackets, and then they would have like an animal on them. And I don't think my mother liked that kind of clothing, so I never got one. But when it came to the driver, the idea was to give him like an animal presentation. And obviously using the bomber concept of like, especially something that would shine like satin, because there were usually satin jackets back then. And and Ryan is enormously sensitive to his wardrobe and really understands how important it is for what you wear as an actor. And so we found a bomber jacket that he felt comfortable in, and then we replicated it. And then originally I was looking at more masculine animals, to like a horse or an eagle or something like that. But then I was out one day with the costume designer looking at wardrobe for like a mechanic shop. And Ryan was learning how to put a car together and stuff like that. And I showed I had this idea of Scorpio Rising, which was a Kenneth Anger movie, which was very interesting. And I started on my telephone, and it started with scorpion, obviously, and I was like, that's it. It's a scorpion. So the actual design of the scorpion is a replica of Anger's movie.
Okay.
I think it's interesting what you said about the emptiness in scenes, because as a viewer, for us, I guess I can speak for you too, it often feels like when a character is waiting for an answer during a dialogue, there's a lot of emptiness too, because sometimes it quite takes a while until the dialogue is continued. So how do you view dialogue? Because in the documentary, you said you often edit later after you envisioned the scene. So is dialogue something you have to do to take the viewer with you? Or is it something you really use to progress the plot?
Well, I mean, film is a visual medium, first of all. And talking and performing and having tried different ways of performance, with actors. It's an interesting kind of concept of how do you react to something that essentially is artificial as performance, But I'm very interested in stillness, because I started my career more interested in authenticity and the kind of the performance being naturalistic and obviously dialogue heavy. But you very come to understanding that at the end of the day, it is a visual medium, and it is to tell a story. And so for me, it's been more like saying, how can you lose dialogue? Not because dialogue is not necessary or amazing, especially for a performer, but because is there a purer essence in what you say? So when you say something, the less you say, essentially the more you say.
When it comes to stillness, you have shots in your movies, a lot of very beautifully shot shots, which are often very still. So, yet there is this constant feeling of an inherent and underlying violence in basically every movie I have seen from you. So this is a violence which often awaits to burst out, and it often does. But in between is always this very beautiful shot from one to another, beautiful shot here, beautiful shot there. So how do you envision this before you start to film? Do you have in mind a special scene in mind and think, okay, this would be very nice, but I still want to have this kind of suspension?
Well, I don't so much think about it. That it's more like if you were to paint a picture, what do you want it to look like? And there's it's like everything in an image matters, whether it repeats to another form of narrative or it's a handoff, it's a story-wise. But, forcing attention is a very interesting concept. The idea that you have to give yourself to the experience, and then the experience will give you something back.
What I would be interested in is, do you watch modern cinema closely, like others directors do? And we have some directors who very often say what they think about modern cinema. Not so often. You don't do this so often. So do you watch it closely, or are you just more interested in what you can create yourself?
I'm interested in anything. I don't watch that much anymore than I used to when I was younger. Having done 2 streaming shows, obviously that format was very intriguing to me. But I still think that cinema is the essence of what we do. And that has a lot to do with, I think, the collective experience of almost cathedral-like arena. There's an energy in that can never be duplicated anywhere else. I watch a lot of things on my iPhone and other digital components and stuff. But I think there's a lot of great things in all formats. But in a way, cinema and television is really not as irrelevant anymore as other things that my kids, for example, use. Social media apps or communication as narrative. There's an extension of a world. Gaming, obviously, is a whole other canvas that is just emerging in an explosive way. So it's a way, it's more interesting to see what the future is rather than what's right in front of you.
So, final question. Copenhagen Cowboy took you back to Denmark. What will be your next project?
I don't know yet. I haven't decided. I have some ideas, but I haven't really made up my mind yet.
Okay. Going to be interested in what it will be. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you.